Today on Money Matters, from village boy to corporate leader, we speak to well-known corporate leader Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar as he shares his thoughts on facing the economic challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Join us as he speaks on leadership and management strategies for companies. Hello there and welcome to another episode of Money Matters. I'm your host, Zahir Kalvinong Abdullah. Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar's resume is long. He's led UEM Group, Telekom Malaysia and Maybank, just to name a few. He's even served as a minister in the Prime Minister's department in charge of economic planning. Now he serves as the chairman of Bursa Malaysia. Welcome to the show, Tan Sri.
Thank you, Zahir.
Let's begin with how you started, basically, an inspiration for others from humble beginnings. A kampung boy, if you will, to captain of industry. Perhaps we can start with your early days leading to your Mara scholarship to study in the UK.
Well, thank you, Zahir. Well, I grew up in Kampung Tarum back in the 60s and 70s. And I was born as the 9th child out of a family of 11 to Haji Omar and Haja Halimah. Life was very hard when we were small. But we were fortunate because, number one, we have very dedicated parents who raised all 11 of us successfully. Then we had the extended support from the uncles and aunties and our grandparents who supported us in terms of financially through our education. Mm-hmm. And thirdly, we have that proactive policy, the new economic policy that enabled people from a poor background to be given good education and to take the family out of poverty. So I benefited through that, and in some ways given the scholarship to go to MRSM Seremban. Now, this is one of the great things that we had, the creation of boarding schools, whether it's MRSM or SMS, across the country, to enable people from underprivileged family to be given good education, conducive learning environment, and dedicated teachers.
Tan Sri, we have some pictures of you here. Basically, can you perhaps tell us what exactly is going on here, and which one are you actually? The one that you're in circle right now.
Okay, so this is me at Heathrow Airport, and this one is me when I was at MRSM Seremban. We were actually doing some performance, I guess, to impress the other people. And this one at the Heathrow Airport in particular was on my last day of departure after graduating from ACCA back in 1987. Now, as you know, typical Malaysians, one person flying and there'll be 30 people sending them at the airport.
Family and friends, yeah?
Family and friends, yeah.
Okay, like moving on, you've been seen as Mr. Fix-It, the troubleshooter, so to speak. And you have led many companies and conglomerates like what I'm reading here, UEM, Berhad, Telekom Malaysia, of course Maybank, then you were minister as well. PNB, and at present Bursa Malaysia and also UKM. So what would you say was your most challenging position?
Well, as an accountant, my ambition was to be a chief financial officer of a major public listed company. And Alhamdulillah, I got that when I was appointed as the CFO of Telekom Malaysia back in March 2001. And I never dreamt of going further than that. But Alhamdulillah, I was given the opportunity to spearhead the turnaround of the UEM Renung Group back in October 2001. And that being my first job as a CEO, and the huge challenge of turning around a conglomerate with 11 public listed company with huge debts. I must say that was the most challenging, I would say.
You're saying that that's even more challenging than you being a minister?
Yes, in many ways, because when you have a company settled with 30 billion ringgit of debt, and at that point in time, interest rate was at 8% per annum, so 2.4 billion ringgit of interest servicing or 200 million ringgit per month, with not much cash flow. So you need to do something drastic on the capital structure and do some major restructuring to survive. And you're actually given a very short period of time to get it working.
Okay, now I have to touch on this because a lot of people there also know that you actually had a stint as an Uber driver. Of course, this was more for raising funds, but what was the experience like and how did you basically decide to do that?
Yeah, so that happened after I completed my term in the cabinet, and whilst looking out, I thought, why don't I try out Uber driving? Because I wanted to understand how easy or difficult it is to use technology to earn a living. Wanted to interact more with the people, and also to raise some money for charity. So it was actually quite an interesting experience, I must say.
And I'm sure the passengers that you pick up must have been quite shocked, the fact that it was Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar driving them, right?
Well, I operated inside Berjaya, so majority of the passengers were foreigners, Chinese nationals, Indian nationals, and even Thai nationals. But to the few Malaysians that I drove, yeah, some of them were quite surprised.
Okay, now moving on, you were appointed as Bursa Malaysia non-executive chairman in May this year. Obviously, in the most trying times for the country. What were your immediate concerns when taking up the job? Because we were already in the midst of an MCO.
Right. I think firstly, I must say that being given the opportunity to chair Bursa Malaysia is a great privilege. And something which was close to my heart in the sense that I had served on the board of Bursa Malaysia for 7 years, from 2004 until 2011. So I'm very familiar with the business, the people, and the organization. And taking on the chairperson role gives me the opportunity to get started immediately. And of course, the period was challenging, but having said that, it also presented Bursa with a great opportunity. So among others, for example, we have not seen the kind of volumes being traded on the exchange currently like before. And the extent of retail participation is just phenomenal, I would say.
Yeah. When you took over, the board actually released a statement saying that Bursa Malaysia had to be mindful to ensure that the group's governance structure and stability of Malaysia's capital markets. With that said, there were some people who were saying that with that statement, did it look like to the people outside that Bursa Malaysia was sort of losing its way and you were coming back in to put them back on track?
Well, Zahir, Bursa Malaysia is a very unique entity. It's got 3 roles. One, as a frontline regulator. Secondly, as the exchange, the marketplace, if you like. And the third, as a public listed company itself. So I think naturally, unlike any other publicly listed company, that additional function as the exchange and the frontline regulator would require us to be truly at the forefront of governance in everything that we do. And I think in an environment where we are seeing growing volume, we have to make sure that the infrastructure is in place to support that growth in volume. We also need to make sure that we undertake the appropriate surveillance to make sure that all the participants in the market behave in the appropriate manner. And at the end of the day, our function is to make sure that the market operates in a fair and orderly manner. Okay,
thank you. We've just got to go for a very quick commercial break. Stay with us. We're talking to Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar. See you soon. Welcome back to Money Matters. If you have just joined us, we're talking to Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar, the chairman of Bursa Malaysia. During the commercial break, Tan Sri, you told me that this is your 100th day as chairman of Bursa Malaysia, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Okay. When we had Mr. Firas Raad, World Bank's country manager for Malaysia, on Money Matters on the previous program, he mentioned that the World Bank's view is that Malaysia is riding out the severe economic downturn comparatively better than many other economies. Do you agree on this?
Yes, I do, I must say. I think in the first place, I think we have over the years diversified the structure of our economy. to be less dependent on commodities. And now 57% of our economy is very much driven by the services sector, and followed by the manufacturing sector. And the commodity sector, whether it's mining plus plantation, so they make up only about 14%. So that means that we will not be overly affected by any volatile movements in commodities. We also diversified the source of our income, the trading partners, and facilitating greater intra-ASEAN trade, for example. And we also learned very well from our past experience. Now, for example, during the 1997-98 Asian financial crisis, we were hit very badly. But after that, we recovered, and among the measures undertaken were the strengthening of the financial system. So, for example, the banks were recapitalized, and then they were better supervised, and they're now better regulated too. And we have also expanded the capital market. And I think Malaysia has got one of the broadest and the deepest capital market in the region. And I think learning from what has happened before had prepared us better for the future.
Right. So we're just looking, well, in 98, like you mentioned, it was more of a financial crisis, but this one sort of encompasses everything, basically. Indeed. So just your opinion on this, as an ex-banker, you know, there's been a lot of calls for the moratorium basically to be extended. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the right approach would be to make sure that everything that we do must be based on needs. And it cannot be a blanket program, even to cover people who don't deserve it. So I think the recent tweaking announcement by the Prime Minister, I think that's very appropriate. So meaning that, yes, moratorium will be given to those people who are affected. So if you have lost your jobs, for example, I think you deserve to be helped in that sense. Right. But if you're a salaried person and you continue to get your pay month in, month out, I don't think you deserve any moratorium in the first place, and certainly no extension. Right.
Okay. Now, so the government, of course, is trying to look at a V-shaped recovery. Do you think we're on our way there for a V-shaped recovery?
We've seen in the first quarter the economy grew by 0.7%, but that's at the onset and prior to the full effect of the MCO. The second quarter is where we will be hit very hard. And I think the numbers have yet to be announced, but if you go by most analysts, I suppose, forecast, Maybank, for example, is looking at an 8.8% decline in GDP for the second quarter. So naturally, as we get into a recovery mode and no more lockdown, so in the third quarter, the economy has recovered. So therefore, from that dip, I suppose in the economy in the second quarter, you can expect a natural rebound. But to what extent will it result in positive number for the whole of 2020? I don't think so. I think many people are expecting 2 to 4% kind of negative growth. And in the case of Maybank Kim Eng, I understand that they have a 3.3%, I suppose, forecast for GDP, minus 3.3% for 2020.
Looking at what's happening now, obviously one of the concerns is employment. You are chairman of University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Of course, one of the major concerns during this pandemic are the employment rate for youth. So is there anything UKM is doing in terms of placement of youths in perhaps training programs or with companies outside?
Yeah. Just to be clear, Zahir, I think it's very important for us to make sure that we minimize the number of companies that are affected by this pandemic. So the idea would be to keep viable businesses afloat as long as possible and to keep people employed. Now, that will also enable the companies to continue to recruit people. The biggest challenge for the younger generation today is that given the pandemic, not many companies are recruiting. So that's why they are more affected. So on the part of people like UKM and other universities, our role is to prepare the human capital necessary for businesses. So not just for this pandemic period, but in the future too. And this is where collaboration with the industries is highly relevant. So we do want to produce graduates that are relevant, who are ready, and in many ways future-proof, taking into account the new normal post-COVID-19.
Right. Okay, now, like you mentioned just now, these are basically very trying times for the economies, companies, SMEs, for example, will be trying to look into conserving their cash flow, but at the same time, the government is asking firms to assist in stimulating the economy. So how do they strike a balance between this?
Yes, I think the idea would be to try to control your costs and to operate at the minimum cost possible so that until your revenue starts to come in again, you're able to sustain for a longer period. Now, obviously, the government is helping in the sense that apart from the 295 billion ringgit of stimulus package, there's also that accommodative interest rate or monetary policy. So the overnight policy rate is now down to 1.75%, which is conducive for investments to be made. So the idea would be for those people, whether businesses or individuals alike, at 1.75% OPR, your cost of interest servicing or cost of financing is actually lowered, and at the same time, it will make the hurdle rate for new investment lower too.
Right.
So hopefully there'll be more investments coming up.
Right, thank you. We've just got to go for our final commercial break. When we come back, we're going to ask Tan Sri on the emergence of millennials in the marketplace. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Matters. We are speaking to Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar, the chairman of Bursa Malaysia. Tan Sri, adding on to that, what we were talking about just now, just before we went for the commercial break, the emergence of basically millennials in the marketplace has been seen as very encouraging for Bursa. Right. How are you reacting to these millennial investors? Well,
one of the benefits of this, or unintended consequences of this COVID-19 is that when people start to work from home, people start to get used to online platforms and technology. And the millennials, being very savvy in technology, they are then exposed to investment opportunities and so on. And I think on our part, we have started with many educational platforms to educate the young investors through our Bursa marketplace, our Bursa Anywhere app, for example. And Alhamdulillah, we've seen great response. And just to give you an idea, Zai, for the first 6 months of this year, we've seen some 166,000 new accounts open. That's 43% higher than last year. And more interestingly, 64% of that 166,000 accounts being opened are from the millennials, those between 25 and 40 years old.
So looking at that, like you said, with the increase of active trading accounts basically belonging to the millennials, and it being very attractive, and as you mentioned, that basically it's due to their exposure to financial education and knowledge readily available on the internet, so to speak. And of course, coupled with the rise of online trading. So would this be the focus in terms of getting more people to do online trading?
Well, on our part, obviously, we would like to prepare the marketplace across all platforms, both physical and online. But naturally, online will give us greater flexibility in the sense that there's a lot of information that the investors can have direct access to. They can trade faster and obviously cheaper too, because the cost of transacting online is much cheaper compared to physical, going through your typical remisers or brokers. But from our perspective, we will cater to different profile of investors in the sense that some will require light touch, and these are the people who will be happy with online. Some require a lot more hand-holding, and they like more advisory kind of approach, and they'll prefer dealing with remisers and dealers representatives.
Right, because obviously you need to look into ensuring that not everyone thinks that this is basically something that can go in and make money. There should be some cautionary measures as well be known to them.
Yeah, indeed. I think it's important for us to make sure that every single investor is equipped with the appropriate knowledge. So investor education is very high on our priority list. And we're not just starting when they've started work, but even at universities, and we have many programs. And hopefully we'll be going to school as well, to make sure that we prepare people early, so that when they invest wisely.
Right. There are some brokerages now in the US and Hong Kong who basically are saying that they want to do away with commissions for stock trade. Would this be something that the Bursa will be looking into as well?
Well, on our part, we believe in, again, a multi-pronged approach. I think there must be appropriate incentives or reward for the participating organization or brokers, so that with some revenue that they generate, they will then be able to invest in quality research and other services to the investors. So I guess you will have different profile of brokers. Some will go for perhaps money from other sources, from data and so on. But typically, we do expect majority of the brokers to continue to charge appropriate brokerage, again, so that they can fund their research analysts and so on, which will then be used by the investors.
Right, right. You talked about the Bursa Marketplace. Basically, that was launched, if I'm not mistaken, in 2014. Has Bursa Marketplace basically exceeded expectations? Because looking at the number of millennials that's getting involved with this now.
Yes, I think in this new environment, we are seeing a lot more people logging on and using Bursa Marketplace. But I think more interestingly, we now have Bursa Anywhere app and other facilities so that people can start to open account online. So with electronic know your customer or KYC processes being facilitated. So that's why even during this period lately, we've seen some 14,000 new CDS accounts that were opened online without any physical presence requirement.
Right.
And recent sign-up, we have some 90,000 users. So I think that's very encouraging.
Yeah, so you're very happy with the response there, right?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, we're very happy. Yes,
good.
Indeed.
Okay, now, other than what we have been seeing in terms of back-to-back record days for Bursa Malaysia for both trading volume, how do you explain this? Is it the confidence that's in the market right now?
Well, we have seen the emergence of retail investors in a way which we've not experienced before. You know that during this crisis period, we've seen the foreign institutional investors in particular exiting. So this year, for example, year to date, we've seen some 19 billion ringgit exiting the market. But we're fortunate because we have 10.7 billion ringgit of domestic institutional investors coming in and some 9 billion ringgit of retail investors coming into the market. And these people, there are various reasons for that. Among others is also the low cost of, or the low interest rate environment has resulted in many people looking for alternative investment instruments, so equities in particular, in search of better returns.
Right.
But
Tan Sri, thank you very much for appearing on Money Matters. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week. If you have any comments about the show today, reach out to us on Twitter and let us know. We'll be back again next week with more money insights that matter. I'm Zahir Kelvinong Abdullah. Thank you for watching. Stay safe.
Thank you.